comes a little closer to home because I'd like to speak about the situation of Orthodox Christianity in the 1980s. The first aspect I'd like to talk about concerns what I already mentioned at the beginning, the spirit of worldliness, the watering down of orthodoxy, the loss of the sense of difference between orthodoxy and heterodoxy. These have produced the ecumenical movement in our times, which is leading to the approaching union, the unia, with Rome and the Western confessions. And such a thing could very well happen in the 1980s. Just in the last year or so, the new Pope of Rome has made overtures to the East, and the Patriarch of Constantinople has said how much he welcomes them. And it could very well be within a few years that there will be a communion between the Pope and Orthodoxy. That is, the Orthodox jurisdictions that follow the ecumenical patriarch. For us, of course, we would be outside that, and it would not concern us directly, but it's something we have to face. This will probably not be a spectacular event, because most Orthodox people in most jurisdictions have become so unaware of their faith and so indifferent to it that they will only welcome the opportunity to receive, say, communion in a Roman or an Anglican church, and would not even know what's wrong with it. This spirit of worldliness is what is in the air and seems natural today. In fact, it might be said to be the religious equivalent of the atheist agnostic atmosphere which is in back of the spread of communism in the world. What should be our response to this movement towards watering down the faith, uniting it with the Western confessions? Fortunately, our bishops in the Russian Church outside of Russia have given us a sound policy to follow. We do not participate in the ecumenical movement. Our Metropolitan has warned other Orthodox churches of the disastrous results of their ecumenical course if they continue it. But at the same time, our bishops have refused to cut off all contact and communion with Orthodox churches who are involved in the ecumenical movement, recognizing that the ecumenical movement is still a tendency that has not yet come to its conclusion, which is the union with Rome. And that at least in the case of the Moscow Patriarchate and other churches behind the Iron Curtain, the ecumenism is a political policy which is enforced upon the Church by secular authorities. But thus our Russian Church abroad suffers attacks both from the left side, from ecumenists who accuse us of being uncharitable, behind the times, and all those things which up-to-date modern people are not supposed to be, and from the right side by groups, especially in Greece, that demand that we break communion with all other Orthodox churches and declare them to be without grace. If one looks at the state of the Orthodox Church in Greece, we can see that there the ecumenical movement has produced a reaction which has often become excessive, and sometimes is almost as bad as the disease it seeks to cure. The more moderate of the old calendar groups in Greece, those that are broken off from the mainline church, the church in Athens and Constantinople, has a position, this old calendrist church has a position very similar to that of our Russian Church abroad. But among these old calendrists, there have been schism after schism over the question of strictness. And I especially like to direct our attention to this question of strictness, which seems such a good thing to be strict and zealous, but it has a very negative side if we do not approach it the right way. For example, I know one monk on Mount Athos, in fact he's been in this very monastery, who is in communion with only 10 other monks in the whole world, and with nobody else in the whole Orthodox Church. And he is a moderate. He has one priest, that's a very good man, Father Herman met him, and if this priest were to die, he would have nowhere to receive Holy Communion. And I asked him when I saw him a few years ago what he would do in that case, and he said, I just don't know. I'm stuck. And the reason he's a moderate is that he recognizes that there is grace in all the other Orthodox churches. But he is so strict in this policy that because the Patriarch of Constantinople is already speaking about being soon in union with Rome and is already going away from the faith, therefore he is fallen, and anyone who is in communion with him, or is in communion with someone who is in communion with him, or is in communion with someone who is in communion with someone who is in communion with him, is out. And therefore, being strict, he finds that this network he has established out of strictness includes the whole Orthodox churches, every place in the world, except in this one little corner of Mount Athos. In fact, not even all.
Just himself, but even there might be.
Well, there's 10 others who think like him, apparently. Maybe it's fewer now. But he's a very good man. He's very sincere, very zealous, he's sort of simple, and he has no answers for other people who are stuck with having to live in the world and things like that. He's very sort of, in fact, in some respects, very childlike. But the strictness of his has placed him in such a position that he's like painting himself into a corner. And he has sort of no opportunity to be in fellowship and contact with other people who are actually of the same mind he is, but just haven't got this particular point about not being in communion with those who are in communion and so forth. But other groups in Greece have a spirit which is something close to what one might call fanatical. A few years ago, one of these groups excommunicated our Russian church abroad because our bishops refused to declare that all other Orthodox churches are without grace. This group now declares that since 1924, only it has had grace, and only it is Orthodox. And this group has recently attracted a few converts from our Russian church abroad. So we should be aware that this attitude is a danger to some of us American and European converts. With our calculating, rationalistic Western minds, it is very easy to think we are being zealous and strict, when actually we are chiefly indulging our passions for self-righteousness. One old calendar bishop in Greece has written us that incalculable harm has been done to the Orthodox Church in Greece by what he calls the correctness disease. When people quote the canons, the fathers, the typicon, in order to prove that they are correct. This correctness disease, which occurs when people quote the canons, the fathers, and the typicon, the church services, in order to prove that they are correct and everyone else is wrong. Correctness can truly become a disease when it is administered without love and tolerance and awareness of one's own imperfect understanding. Such a correctness only produces continual schisms, and in the end it only helps the ecumenical movement by reducing the witness of sound orthodoxy. Because now in Greece, the new calendar church laughs at the old calendars because there are so many different groups, or at least 5 different jurisdictions. Therefore, the first fact about orthodoxy today, and into the 1980s, is the worldly spirit by which orthodoxy is losing its savor. Orthodox Christians are ceasing to be the salt of the world. This is expressed in the ecumenical movement, together with the excessive reaction against it, which becomes excessive because it has the same worldly spirit which is present in the ecumenical movement.